Hello, hello, and welcome to another podcast episode of Overpowering Emotions, where I talk all things big emotions, emotion regulation. I've been talking about emotional intelligence, and previously I talked about expanding kids' emotional vocabulary, which is very important for us to be able to regulate our emotions. Be sure to check out that episode if you haven't already, just to make sure we're all on the same page. Because today I'm going to talk about what kids can start doing once they're able to actually name their feelings. Okay, so we can't really move on until they're in the practice of identifying how they're actually feeling. So remember, it's important to think about emotions acting as filters. They really shape the way we see and interpret the world. So, if a teacher walks into a class, for example, feeling frustrated or stressed, their perception of the student is going to change and student behavior. So, if a teacher's walking in, they've had a bad morning already, maybe they're in a car accident and they see kids standing up, goofing off, they are more likely to yell, right? Or get upset with the kids or, misinterpret the behavior versus another day where they're coming in and they're happy and they had a good morning and they're easygoing and now they're going to, tease the students in a friendly way, right? It's going to make a big difference. A harmless comment from a kiddo might be interpreted as defiance rather than actual curiosity. Like, I'm sorry, I was just asking a question. It's the same thing with parents. If they have a headache, one little scream can send them over the top, even though the scream might have been the siblings were actually getting along. They were playing together, right? Emotions really shift how we process any incoming information, how we perceive the world, how we make decisions, how we connect with other people. It ultimately guides our behaviors. And so if you have a stressed out student, they're more likely to focus on whatever is going on, their text message rather than focusing on the math that they're supposed to be doing. They're more likely to fixate on any discomfort or physiological symptoms that they have than their homework, right? But an excited student, a curious student, they're going to be engaged and they're going to be more willing to learn. So we really need to think about that how emotion really is a filter for the world and how we interact with the world. So think about a time when emotions have impacted your decision making. Did you pause and reflect? Right? Did you think about how am I feeling? Hopefully you've been doing this practice, pulling out a feelings wheel or just being able to identify. Have you been able to stop and reflect and identify how am I feeling? What is the best choice now that I can make? If you haven't been, then I suggest you continue doing that because it's going to be really difficult to expect kids to if we're not modeling these things. But, having a little bit more awareness, how do you think you might respond differently in any situation or react differently in any situation? Those things are really important to think about. Okay. So just continue looking at the awareness and also being aware of how that awareness is actually helping. Okay. So, I think that's going to be really helpful. Now, if you have listened from last week, I've talked about normalizing and acknowledging all emotions. And we're using that information. We're collecting data because emotions are data. They give us information about, again, how we're interacting with the world around us. When we feel anxious, our brain's signaling there's a potential danger here. When we're angry, we're perceiving some sort of injustice, even if it's someone took my pencil. Labeling emotions as good or bad can really lead to kids suppressing what they feel. And suppressed emotions, we know, isn't helpful. They don't disappear. They're just going to bubble up. They're like little pressure cookers, right? They're just going to bubble up under the surface until they explode. So instead of viewing emotions as black and white, good and bad, we need to teach them that those emotions are good for everything. We need them for everything. They're a valuable part of who we are. And so also looking at that information, that data that we're collecting, it's valuable data. That's essential to know what to do next. Okay, so that includes for us too. If we can identify how a kiddo is feeling, that's going to give information to us how we are going to respond and what we are going to do next. If they are so dysregulated and freaking out, that gives us good information. We're not going to get in their face. We're not going to talk and engage and try to calm them down. We're just going to back off. They're like the snow globe. We just got to let that snow settle, that storm settle on its own. We got to give space. So I think that that's really important, right? So we're not going to get in there and tell them what to do and take a deep breath or pay attention. Okay. We know when they're so dysregulated, we're just going to get pushback. We're just going to escalate it. Okay. Maybe if they aren't, we can see that they're upset, but they're not so dysregulated, we can ask an open-ended question, right? What do you need right now to help focus? What do you need right now to get things back on track? What do you need right now to get out the door happy and still loving me? Right? That simple shift really validates their experience, and we're opening up the door to emotion regulation. We're getting their prefrontal cortex online so that they can think about what's going to, what's going to be next. It's much easier to regulate an emotion if they can identify, we can identify and respond in helpful ways. Now, regulating emotions is a skill we all need, but it does take time. It does take patience. Practice. Practice is the most important thing. We can't tell kids strategies without activating that emotional brain and then practicing managing them. We have to practice creating that pause to identify, how am I feeling? Because if they're overly reactive and they've already responded, they're not going to be able to use any skills. It's too late. So that's why I like getting them to drop into the body. That helps us keep that pause. It keeps our prefrontal cortex online and creates the space we need. Dropping into the body. How am I feeling? What am I feeling in my body? That's getting us curious, keeping the prefrontal cortex online, and now we can identify the emotion and acknowledge it. Acknowledge whatever's going on, right? Acknowledge that that emotion's trying to protect us or warn us or help us keep our pencil or help us do our best. We've got to recognize its purpose. So last week I had a little handout that I will include in the show notes again here today so you can use it to modify, just looking at the purpose of some of those emotions. But the key here really when we're practicing is to embrace the discomfort. We're not trying to fix it or make it go away or suppress it or do anything with it. That data, we got to collect it. It's going to help us figure out our next move. So we got to sit with it and learn with it, right? And we got to make sure we are giving kids that chance to do that, to sit in that discomfort, to sit in whatever's going on for them so that they can use their problem solving and figure out what it is that they need next. Now, I'm going to talk about using emotional energy and reframing things in future episodes because I think that that's really important because especially some of these big unpleasant emotions like anxiety and anger, it gives us a lot of energy and we can actually use that to our advantage. So I do want to talk about that. But being able to, even for right now, just think that emotion, right? Once we realize what its purpose is, that can be really helpful. So that's why we want to externalize it. Give it a name. Okay, freaking out friend, thank you for showing up today. Thank you for trying to help me study. I got this under control. This is what I'm actually going to do. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to have some water and I'm going to come back. I'm going to make a plan for myself and I'm going to come back and study for 10 minutes, do the Pomodoro, right? And then we can get into that procedural thinking. What is next? When we externalize the emotion, like the Minions I like, or the Hulk. Hulk is such a great example. When we see Dr. Banner's getting dysregulated, the Hulk comes out, right? So we can focus on building our own Dr. Banner prefrontal cortex. What would my Dr. Brain do if it was online? How would Dr. Banner handle this situation, right? How would my best self handle this situation? How would mom and dad want me to handle the situation so I don't get in trouble, right? How would my PFC, prefrontal cortex, whatever language that they want? Thank you, emotional brain. I see that you're there. I've got it under control. What is it that I need? What do I need to ask for? That small pause can really help reshape, again, what to do next and make positive choices about what they need to do. So we want to acknowledge that reflection as much as possible as the adult to acknowledge, hey, I can see you working through this process. That's amazing. You are taking back control of your brain. So if I feel, for example, overwhelmed with an assignment, I need to figure out where I need to start, right? So that's why we want to break it down. It could just be I'm overwhelmed and screw it, I'm not going to do it at all. But when we break it down, what's the overwhelming piece? It's just getting started. I just need to know how to get started. Okay? So I think this would be really helpful to connect specifically with the mood meter. And that way kids can really become their own emotional detective. It's not just about labeling their emotions accurately, but it's really about being intentional, making better choices. It's not to sit around talking about my feelings all day. It's about identifying what is getting in the way because emotions can block us, right? If emotions aren't blocking us, we don't need to do this. But if emotions are blocking us, and they probably are, if there's any behaviors that come out that are getting in kids' way of learning or doing their chores or getting along with friends, I mean, it's the emotions that are really getting in the way. And that's why they need to identify them to figure out what to do. So, again, if you've turned into my previous episodes, I'm assuming a lot here that you have been listening, at least from the past couple of weeks, looking at this emotional intelligence. But I talked about the mood meter and specifically the mood meter. I've used lots of variations, but I'm really liking Mark Brackett's. So it's essentially a grid. It breaks down emotions into two essential factors. So there's only four pieces that they need to look at on this grid, but there's two essential factors. So on the x-axis, that's our energy levels, how activated or deactivated, energized or unenergized, de-energized you feel. The second on the y-axis is the pleasantness, how pleasant or unpleasant that emotional state feels. And that's going to be different for everybody. Certainly there's ones generally that we think would be unpleasant, for example, anger and anxiety, right? Where pleasant things might be more excitement and happiness. So those two dimensions really intersect to form those four quadrants, and each represents a different cluster of emotions. So in your red quadrant, that's your high energy, high unpleasant emotions, like I said, anger, frustration, anxiety. The yellow quadrant, that's high energy, pleasant emotions. So excitement, joy, enthusiasm. The blue quadrant, that's low energy, low unpleasant emotions like sadness, exhaustion, loneliness. The green quadrant, that's low energy, but pleasant, high and pleasant emotions. So here we're calm, we're content, we're relaxed. That's kind of like the ideal place. But obviously, we're never going to be in the ideal place all the time. Even just from moment to moment to moment, we're probably switching through all the different quadrants, right? In any moment of time, our emotions will exist somewhere within those quadrants, but it's not going to always stay in that quadrant. That'd be unrealistic, anyways. So, using the mood meter really helps kids organize what their experiences are. It helps them make sense of what they're feeling, right? It really helps clarify their internal world. It's breaking it down simplistically, just making it easier to then figure out how do I respond in helpful ways? What is it that I need right now? It's also enhancing empathy for others when they can accurately express their own emotions and build their own, this emotional intelligence. It's not just about their own emotions, but that's where it starts. you know, they can start seeing, what's going on for other people too, but it's also helping other people understand what's happening for this kiddo, especially us adults. We need to know what's happening underneath the surface, right? And then we can respond with more compassion and support. So the mood meter really shifts us from reacting automatically to reflecting on what's going on. And that self-awareness prevents any emotional overwhelm and then the behavioral outbursts that can come from that emotional overwhelm. So we're always looking at emotions as data, right? They're clues pointing us towards maybe it's an unmet need that we have, or maybe it's pointing us to some important event that's happening right now. So the mood meter really helps with this. Now, we got to practice it in daily life. So let's walk through how we can maybe do that. I've talked about some ideas, but I thought I'd break it down even more with a few more concrete examples, right? So the first step is to physically stop and mindfully check in at this moment. How am I feeling? Focus specifically, and you can do this right now, is my energy high or low? Is your energy high or low? Do you feel pleasant or unpleasant? Those are the two questions. It really helps simplify those emotions because we're only focusing on two key aspects that are really easy for kids to recognize: how much energy they have and whether or not they're feeling good or uncomfortable. We might need to break it down even more depending on their developmental age, right? We can ask questions, of course, like how much energy do you have right now? Does your body feel like it wants to run and jump and shout, high energy? Or does your body feel like it wants to sit and rest and lie down, low energy, right? And then we can go to the pleasantness. How good or not so good do you feel? Do you feel happy and calm and excited, pleasant? Or do you feel grumpy and worried and frustrated, unpleasant? But experientially could be really helpful too, so they can see the difference experientially about what's happening. So for high energy, we might like, let's jump up and down, run on the spot, right? So we're getting their body into that excitation phase, and they can really pay attention to that, where their body's going to feel full of energy. And now we're going to sit down after we've done some of that high energy. Let's sit down, and we're going to quietly listen to our body, and you might actually feel like shaking and tingling, right? And that's our body sort of going into more relaxation. How does your body feel now? We can talk about different situations. When you play your favorite game, how does that feel? Is that pleasant or unpleasant? When you lose, right, a game, does it feel, how does that feel? Pleasant or unpleasant? They can probably identify those things. So using those comparisons that they can understand. Remember that time when you were racing with your friend? That was high energy. Remember when you felt like cuddling with the blanket? That's low energy. When you eat ice cream, you had the big smile on your face and you're like, this is so good. That feels pleasant. Remember when you tripped and fell and you hurt your knee? That felt unpleasant. So we can give lots of examples, and kids can come up with lots of examples too. Obviously, with teens, it's a lot easier. They could probably right away. We don't need to give those extra examples. So we want to make sure they understand, but now they have to, in the moment, figure out, describe what high or low energy is feeling like in their bodies and where they're at now. So practicing with those daily check-ins throughout the day is really important, because we're going to normalize those discussions about emotions, especially once we start talking about the feelings. But they can start, just we're bringing more self-awareness and building that skill. That's the core skill before anything else, is they have to have awareness before they can do anything else, right? So just looking at those things. You could even do, when you're watching movies or reading a book, how do you think that character feels right now? Do they seem like they've got high or low energy? Do you think that, this is pleasant or unpleasant for them? So that can be really helpful. And doing that can also build empathy, right? And helping kids learn about recognizing emotions in other people. Now, once kids have gotten into the habit of identifying the energy and the pleasantness, now we can start introducing those emotion words. So we might start, hey, you said your energy is high, but you said you feel unpleasant. Do you think that that's feeling like angry or nervous or scared? Or maybe your energy is low and you're feeling pleasant. What do you think? Do you think that's calm? Do you think that's sleepy? Do you think that's relaxed? We want to get them to really refine the experience. That's where we're really fine tuning things, because it's that specificity that's going to help with that emotion regulation. So if I'm in yellow, getting down to, is it excitement? Is it pride? Getting really specific. And I really want them to explore words. And this is part of the job that you'll be doing as well, right? In modeling that. We don't want just happy and mad. We want to explore those words: elated, energized, irritable, disheartened, right? For younger kids, it might really just be happy and calm and mad and angry. It might just be those things, but we want to keep building and keep building, right? Have a target. Every month we're going to learn a new word, or a few new words that we're going to add under happiness and anger and sadness. I'm not one to really focus on triggers, but in some cases it can be helpful just to explore what's happening, what was happening right before kids felt whatever they're feeling in the moment, right? What might be influencing that emotion, just to get clues about what's going on for them, and collecting more data. That's going to help them. But again, looking into the future and noticing their patterns and building the practice is really key. And really what key is curiosity. We want them to be curious because if they're curious, their prefrontal cortex is online. So once we have that information about their emotional state, we can respond in helpful ways, right? And we can help support them to do the next step. And that next step is thinking about, what do I need now? How can I support myself in the moment? What do I need to do right now? What do I need from others right now? Each of the different colors can give us clues. And I'd recommend that they've got their own, and you do this as well. Fill out your own quadrants of different strategies and what works for you when you're in different strategies. So, for example, in the red quadrant, maybe exercise is helpful. In the blue quadrant, maybe seeking comfort, talking to a friend, maybe having, a rest. Having a little nap or just going and resting is helpful. And that yellow quadrant, maybe sharing the happiness, or maybe it's diving into the creative project. When I have a lot of that high energy, high pleasant, I mean, that's when I want to dive in and do my presentations or just something creative, my painting or whatever else just helps fuel some of that. In the green, maybe that's where we practice our mindfulness. Maybe we're expressing gratitude or just relaxing. So we can start looking at some of those different quadrants, and you can really reinforce this learning by having fun with it. I've talked about having an emotion bingo, for example, where, you could start out by just calling out high energy, high pleasant, low pleasant, a mix of high and low, right? You could start calling them out where kids are matching just like, a bingo card, but eventually having them mark off their own experiences through the day, right? I like that because we can expect all emotions to come up at some point, all energy levels, all levels of pleasantness, and all are accepted, all are welcomed, all are even anticipated, right? So when they're not things to avoid, and that's really important. It's not about avoiding. We're looking out for them, noticing them, and we're getting that reinforcement with them. You could make a wheel divided into different emotions, pleasant, unpleasant, high energy, low energy, and kids are spinning the wheel and sharing a memory. If they land on a certain thing, sharing a memory or a story when they felt that emotion. So again, we're normalizing it, we're expanding the vocabulary, we're connecting feelings to real life experiences. I do love the mood jar where you have a clear jar and different colored beads or pom-poms or whatever it is. And then you've got each of your quadrant colors, right? Your red, your blue, your yellow, and your green. And every time they're checking in, they're putting in, the corresponding color. At the end of the day, end of the week, you can talk about and start looking at the patterns. Talk about what colors are we seeing most of, right? So they can see over time those different patterns. We do want to eventually get to, looking at how we can shift how we're feeling because we can shift our mood and that's going to shift our behavior. And sometimes we need to we need to get into that yellow for studying, for example, or maybe even a little bit of that red for studying, right? And so, how do we go from blue, where I just want to sleep, to get activated, energized so that I can study effectively? You can have an emotion dance party where you play different types of music that evokes various emotions. Music is a great way to evoke different emotions. So maybe fast upbeat for excitement, slow for the soft and calm, and asking kids to move in ways that express, how that music is making them feel. Doing something like this really connects the body awareness to their emotions and it reinforces how energy can shift with moods as well. Mood scavenger hunt, creating a list of emotions. And throughout the day, kids are looking for those signs, whether it's in themselves, maybe it's in family, friends, peers, characters, classmates, whatever. So writing down or drawing what they observed. This is really sharpening their emotional recognition, right? It's teaching them to be more observant about other people's emotional states and being aware of their own as well. And I'm all connecting everything that we do back to the body, right? So guiding kids through a quick body scan, that can be really helpful. Is your heart beating fast or slow? Do you feel tightness in your chest or is it light and calm? Is your breathing fast? Is it deep? Is it shallow? We can start looking at those and relaying and relating those physical sensations to the mood states. That's strengthening that mind body connection. That's going to really increase the self awareness, which is so important. And then gratitude practice. I don't think I can ever go very long without mentioning some sort of gratitude practice, reviewing at least one thing that you're grateful for, maybe at the end of the day, at dinner time, at bedtime. It's just reinforcing some of those pleasant emotions and the emotional awareness of pleasant emotions because our brain can hold on to the unpleasant emotions quite a bit. Movement breaks, I mean, that's so important for mood shifts and it's teaching emotion regulation through physical activity. So all of this, is important for teens too. I'm talking about activities that might seem like it's just for younger kids, but the teens need this as well. We need this too. Adults need this. We might modify things a bit, but having that mood meter, maybe it's a journal instead, right? That's really helpful to getting them to plot their emotions on that mood meter and asking, what quadrant am I in right now? What is making me feel this way? What do I need to do, or do I need to shift, or what do I need to do to sustain this mood for whatever it is that I'm doing in the moment or for what's to come? Hopefully, they're not on social media, but if they are on social media, maybe they're doing a mood audit. Let's use that time, right? Track how their emotions shift as they're scrolling. Maybe they're coming on and excited, and by the end, they're miserable, right? So just looking at the shift and in different activities, what are activities that help elevate and energize and feel good, right? I don't actually think social media is one of those things. And so maybe we're bringing some awareness to, maybe this isn't the best thing for me. So using the mood meter to label their feelings during and after that scrolling and reflect, well, before, during, and after. And really reflecting what types of posts made me feel pleasant or unpleasant. It's building awareness of how some of those external influences affect their emotional states, and especially something that I know for sure definitely affects their emotional states. So maybe how drained they feel afterwards and things like that. Um, so I have a dog barking. Hopefully you don't hear it. I'm just going to keep going. Having an emotion playlist, I do that a lot with my teens. They probably have an emotional playlist without even realizing it, right? So I use this playlist for when I'm studying and this playlist when I'm working out and this playlist, right? For different energy. But now we can really focus on playlists for the different mood meter quadrants, the red, blue, yellow, and green. They could do mood mapping, whether it's with art or photos that represent emotions in each quadrant for them. They can add to that portfolio every time, over time, just looking at how things change, what images change, but even activities. I mean, I do this with activities. What are things that I like doing, don't like doing, that energize me and don't energize me, right? That really helps me identify where I want to spend more of my time. So if we can start getting kids to do this as adults, it's going to morph into other skills that are going to be helpful for them with things like time management and prioritization. But for right now, I mean, they're engaging with it creatively. It's giving them an outlet for emotional expression and building that awareness. That's what we need because it is time and practice. So we need to make it engaging that they're going to be doing it all the time. I do like the body scans or even just light physical activity. Yoga is really good for this. So you can actually feel in the body, different things that we're doing and then reflecting, how did your body feel during that activity? What did they notice in any shifts in their mood? So again, we're just strengthening that awareness of the mind-body connection and how physical states can really impact our emotions as well. They could set emotional goals based on their mood meter. So if they want to spend more time in the green quadrant this week, maybe we're working on some mindfulness. That's really teaching emotion regulation through intentional goal setting. For teens who are in sports, right? Maybe they can track how emotions in different quadrants affect their performance. So how does being in yellow energize your game? Or how does it, improve or detract from your game? How does being in blue, low energy, affect your focus? So it's really helping teens understand how those emotional states are influencing their performance and resilience. And so then they can start building their toolkit. What are those activities that shift my mood? So exercise for yellow, journaling for blue, music for green. What do I need to be in for this activity right now? Which activity is going to help me move from one quadrant to the next? That's really important. And it's just being more intentional so that they can support themselves for whatever it is that's coming on. Peer support mood mapping can be really helpful too, where we're checking in with somebody, and just building. I mean, we're building connection and the social awareness as well. But we can coach and cheer each other on. What do you need to do so that you can get into the mindset that you need for studying? So at the end of the day, really, it's about reinforcing this mood awareness with consistency and normalization, right? And that's why we want to do these daily practices and link them with real life experiences. And of course, I will say this probably in every episode or as much as I can, modeling that emotional intelligence is key as well. If you can do that, you're going to inspire kids to do the same, and it's just going to become part of daily life. So it really starts with you, whatever your role is, right? Even as teachers in the classroom, we want to be doing this and just normalizing it. And it's part of our day, it's part of our routine. I will leave it there for today. My dogs are still barking. Hopefully, it's not too disruptive. Thank you for joining me. Remember, this is a journey, it's going to take time. Go back and review those other podcasts. These episodes are always going to be here. So make sure you're practicing because it is like a ladder. We are working on each step of the ladder. So it's part of this journey. Be patient, be empathetic, give kids permission to feel and lots of opportunities to practice tapping in, building this self awareness. Help them be bold and courageous. And I will see you next time.